Yeah, we need also the interpretation function. Where? Oh, yeah, it's here. Yeah, sorry. And let's wait another 2 minutes until we start, because I see people, they enter quite quickly. We have now more than 140.
Wow.
Hi, Mrs. Tasama, good to see you.
From Kuwait.
Yeah, so everybody will wait 2 more minutes, and then we shall start. Now we have more than 160 participants. So 1 minute more and we shall give it a go. Let me see if Dr. Jufi responded. Hello, Sumaya. Sumaya is always taking pictures when we have these webinars, because I don't have time to take screenshots, but I try my best to take also some nice screenshots. Okay, so let's start. Dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, Your Excellencies, welcome to this webinar on learning assessment in the Arab region. I would like to welcome you also on behalf of our director, Mrs. Costanza Farina, and all my colleagues who helped organize this webinar. And many thanks to ABEX, to the Arab Bureau of Education for the Gulf states, who supported us with the processes leading to this webinar. We would like, of course, to have a very good discussion for almost 2 hours on this important topic. And I was told a lot of people registered, so more than 600. Of course, not all will be able to attend, but this shows the interest the topic of learning assessment is raising in the region. Our office launched this initiative of developing a learning assessment framework 2 years ago, before the pandemic. But then we stopped a little bit, we put on hold the whole work, and then we continued based on the lessons learned from the pandemic. As some of our colleagues said during these preparatory phases, the pandemic proved to be also kind of blessing in disguise for different issues. It's not altogether a blessing, but it helped us with several decisions and several actually ideas in education, including the usage of technology for different purposes, and that includes assessment. Now I will actually give the floor to several colleagues for the opening session in a minute. Before that, I would like just to share some house rules. So please, you have the option to participate to the webinar in different languages. So you can choose the language to listen to, either English or Arabic. And for the time being, the learning assessment framework is only in English, but we will share in a few weeks the Arabic version, because this webinar is actually to launch the discussion on the framework, on learning assessment altogether, what are the important trends, ideas to focus on, what are the issues that we should advocate for in the Arab region. And after the webinar, we will put in place a more systematic process of collecting feedback and of engaging partners. And we will, of course, acknowledge all those contributing to these discussions. Next February, we would like then to have a second webinar, and in the meantime to collect ideas to enrich and to customize the framework for the Arab region. But I'll come back to these issues at the end when I'll talk about the follow-up process. Now, because we are so many in this meeting, now it's more than 200 people, we will not be able to listen to your oral presentations in the opening session, question and answers and comment session. So please share your comments, questions, or whatever contributions you want to make in the question and answer section and the chat function. My colleague Noor Osta from our office in Beirut, she's with me and she will help me manage all the content in Arabic. So during this open session we have for 20 minutes towards the end of the webinar, we'll be able to share your concerns, your questions, and to address the different panelists. And we'll also take into consideration all these questions for the report. And if we are not able to actually respond immediately to your questions or comments or concerns, we will do that with the webinar report. With regard to timekeeping for the speakers, when they will reach almost the end of their presentation, 1 or 2 minutes, I will make a sign so that they know that they are coming close to the end of their presentation. So again, the goal of this webinar is to launch this discussion about learning assessment based on a document that our office developed with the support of our lead consultant, Dr. Karmal Hassan, from AUB in Lebanon. And we will have a chance to talk more about the framework, its role, and what do we hope to achieve with it in a few minutes. But with this being said, I would like to switch now to the formal opening session of this webinar, and to first invite our colleagues from headquarters, from UNESCO headquarters. And these are Mr. Guangchol Chang, GC, like we call him in UNESCO, who's the Chief of Education and Policy Section, and Mrs. Wong Le Tu, Program Specialist in the same section for lifelong learning support for lifelong learning policies in UNESCO headquarters. So GC, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Nakmara. Thank you, colleagues. Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are. So we would like to share some experience that the UNESCO has been kind of undertaking when it comes to learning assessment. So let me share the screen, my screen, just to, I don't know if you can see this.
Yeah.
Okay, so let me put, okay, so this is in, no, we are very happy that we are invited to share some of the experience that UNESCO has been kind of implementing. And this is going to be on more focusing on collaboration and partnership in the area of learning assessment. We all know that assessment is good if this leads to improved learning outcomes. And also learning outcomes when they are more relevant and they make a sense when for the society as well as for the individuals. I think over the recent years, learning assessment has become one of the important topic in the international education community. partly because SDG 4 Sustainable Development goal on education, which we call SDG 4, calls on more focus on quality and on learning outcomes. This is in the context of what the world is talking about when it comes to education, global learning crisis, and understanding that more people have access to education, they participate in education kind of opportunities, while at the same time we understand that many of these learners in school, they are not learning. So so this is in that context that there are many initiatives that are being taken, and also not only emphasizing the acquisition of the foundational skills, academic knowledge, and so on, but also transversal skills and competencies throughout life. So this is the slide that you are seeing is basically what SDG 4 is about. And also there are different targets that that featuring in under the SDG 4. And we listed different targets there and tried to also provide some the focus of different targets when it comes to acquisition of knowledge, and also relevance of learning and the enabling processing environment. So I would like to share, as I said, there are many initiatives and programs when it comes to monitoring of learning achievement. And I'd like to share here some of UNESCO initiatives, especially regional initiatives. The first one is in Asia and Pacific, NECMAP, which is the short name for the Network on Education Quality Monitoring in the Asia Pacific, which was launched in 2012 or 13, and which is very much focusing not on learning assessment itself, because in Asia, as you might know, this is a very much competitive environment. There are many assessments, both national and also cross-national, cross-country. And what we said is that instead of creating another learning regional assessment, we said that Asia Pacific is so diverse. We should encourage countries of different development levels to exchange knowledge, experience, and expertise on monitoring educational quality in Asia Pacific. So the focus is yes, in facilitating the exchange of knowledge and experience. We said that the focus should be on learning assessment, but also we have to see how learning assessment is aligned also with the curriculum and pedagogy. The second regional network is in Africa, which is called Talent, Teaching and Learning Educators Network for Transformation. This is also not to create another regional assessment programs, because they are already quite a few. And we also wanted to facilitate also sharing of knowledge, experience, expertise across African countries, focusing on alignment of curriculum, pedagogy, and assessment. So another program that that UNESCO is leading is in Latin America, long-standing kind of assessment program itself, which is called LECHE. And so this is mobilizing many almost all Latin American countries in the process of learning achievement program, and also assess factors in a comprehensive sector sense. So this is a few examples that I wanted to share with you from the global level, but focusing on the regional networks when it comes to learning assessment. There are many other initiatives, there are many other networks, but I wanted to focus on those that facilitate the sharing of experience, knowledge, and expertise in several regions of the world. So on this, from there, I'd like to invite my colleagues, Huang, to provide some more in-depth analysis of what is happening in countries.
Thank you, GC. Next slide, please. Here, just continue with that presentation to give you an overview of UNESCO work in learning assessment. Here, housewide, with different institutes, the regional bureaus. We at UNESCO, the work can be divided into 7 strengths. We work on the frameworks and tools for measuring a range of skills and competencies in the life cycle. We also have work on the frameworks for system assessment to improve learning outcomes, looking at it from the system-wide approach. We also work on qualification frameworks and recognition, validation, and accreditation of the learning outcomes. For example, like the work at UNESCO Institute for Lifelong Learning. We also work a lot on data to monitor the quality and outcomes of learning at national, regional, and global level. And this is typically the work of UIS, the UNESCO Institute for Statistics. We also work on research and analytical work to inform policies and strategies. We also have networks, in particular at the regional level. If you recall in the previous slide that GC presented, we have 3 networks in Asia Pacific, in Africa, and in Latin America. And very important, we also work on capacity building through training modules, the resource packs, and the technical support. This is typically the work done by IIP and IBE. Next slide, please. Here in this slide, I just would like to share with you some example of collaboration or partnerships in response to learning crisis. In particular, over the past years with COVID-19, educational disruption, we've seen the educational disruption globally, and here's partners around the world, including countries have allied to support or to address the learning teaching disruption. At the global level, I don't know whether you've heard, but there is a Global Education Coalition, we call it JEC. This is a global framework for collaboration among members to achieve the shared goal. Here at UNESCO, our role is to convene, to coordinate, and to facilitate the link making. Actions underway differ by countries in terms of scope and mobilization of partners, and cover a wide range of activities, from implementation of full work plans to stand-alone activities aligned around the JEC mission. Also, we joined with UNICEF World Bank to organize a series of webinars, if you recall, since last year on reopening schools. As far as the data is concerned, we collaborated with the International Association for the Evaluation of Educational Achievement, IEA, and the European Commission to conduct a survey called Responses to Educational Disruption Survey, or in short, is REDS, to find out how teaching and learning were affected by the disruption caused by COVID-19, and how these were mitigated by the different measures across and within countries. And more recently, we collaborated with World Bank and UNICEF on a new initiative called Learning Data Compact. It was just launched, I think, in a recent webinar or seminar about a month ago. And here the initiative is to ensure that all countries, in particular low and middle income countries, have at least 2 quality measures of learning by 2030. Next slide, please. Hearing or reviewing the different global initiatives and the experience so far, there's some reflection for the Arab region. We see that there is an absence of a regional program or network on student learning, despite the increased number of countries participating in large-scale learning assessment. So you see, we have the network, the regional network in Latin America, in Africa, in Asia, but none of this kind of network exists in Arab region. We see the important role of sharing knowledge, tools, data, innovation, and truly these can help countries in need to, for example, like develop their own national learning assessment policies, including analytical monitoring and evaluation framework. These also can help countries to develop their own capacity to collect, interpret, and report on data and translate the key messages into policy needs. And very important, with data, then countries can build an evidence base for policy development and program design. And very important, for learning assessment data, it also help to ensure accountability for results and improve policy making and improve learning outcomes. So I stop here, and over to you. Thank you very much for the opportunity to share the global picture and some reflection meant for the Arab region. Thank you.
Thank you very much, GC and Huong, for this introduction, and also for mentioning that for now the Arab region is the one in UNESCO that is lacking this network of assessment, learning assessment specialists and stakeholders. But we hope that with this webinar we launch this initiative and the discussion around the learning assessment framework for the Arab region, and this will constitute a basis to establish such a network also in our region, to share experiences and to learn from one another and to build on what was done, because the Arab region is not, let's say, without previous initiatives or experiences in learning assessment. But we don't have indeed the same focus, the same kind of systematic work on assessment like in other regions. And it's time now, especially with the lessons learned from the COVID crisis, to find the time and to find the modalities to work together and to tackle assessment in conjunction with other important components of the education system. With this being said, I will give the floor to our Chief of Education in UNESCO Beirut, Mrs. Hana Yoshimoto, who is also managing the SDG 4 program for our region. And she will, of course, try to discuss the role of learning assessment in reaching SDG 4 targets. And as you know, we all have a dream that learning assessment is contributing to learning, is actually adding value to learning. So let's see what Hana has to say. So Anna, the floor is to you. And Hana, she's on mission, but we appreciate very much the time she's devoting to this webinar.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mara. Hello, everybody from Damascus in Syria at the moment. Thank you. It's a great pleasure to be part of this important consultation event on the Arab Learning Assessment Framework. One of UNESCO Beirut's key roles in this region is to monitor and report on SDG 4 progress in the region. And this year, in 2021, with thanks to the contributions from all the member states, we finalized the SDG 4 regional progress report. It's finalized, we're yet to disseminate, but it's there, that outlines how the Arab region progressed on the Education 2030 agenda over the past years. Also, as many of you may know, this year, the region worked on establishing the regional and national benchmarks on SDG 4. As a reminder, SDG 4 is a collection of 7 targets, 3 means of implementation, 11 global indicators, and 43 thematic indicators. There's many, many indicators. Within this, selected 7 indicators were used for each region. It's a global exercise. So even for us, 7 indicators to be used as the regional and national benchmarks for 2025 and 2030. After multiple regional consultations, bilateral meetings, the Arab region confirmed the benchmark at the regional level in July. This is one milestone, great progress. Following this, and then each country was working on coming up with a national benchmark for 2025 and 2030. As of today, 12 countries from this region have already submitted the national benchmark. 5 more countries to go. This national benchmark will be endorsed during the upcoming global education meeting next month in November. And as a matter of fact, yesterday, ABEX and UNESCO updated the status of this benchmarking exercise from the Arab region yesterday during the global coordination group meeting. Now, the reason why I'm sharing this information on the benchmarking exercise is because during the entire exercise, there was a very clear trend in which specific indicators countries struggled in establishing the benchmark and really struggle in monitoring and gathering the data, irrespective of the country context, whether it was a Gulf country with relatively, higher capacity versus Yemen, same trend. And so countries struggled on indicator, especially on indicator 4.1.1 on learning. The proportion of children and young people at specific stages, at least achieving at least a minimum proficiency in reading and mathematics. Countries also struggled on indicator 4.2.2 on readiness to learn, participation rates at organized learning before primary education. Another indicator that countries also struggled was on indicator 4.C.1 on the quality of teachers, the trained number of teachers also, because there's different standards. Many countries either don't have or for many years haven't delivered systematic assessment, whether it's international or national, like EGRA, EGMA, TIMSS, PIRLS, PISA, etc. And even if you don't participate in these international assessments, if there is alternative robust national assessments, then they could, but not quite. So it became really apparent that the assessment, the learning assessment, really needs to improve in this region. And when you map the SDG 4 indicators in learning assessments, there are 9 global indicators, 26 thematic SDG 4 indicators that rely on learning assessments. So out of all the SDG 4 indicators, more than half actually rely on learning assessments for gathering data and information to report on SDG progress from each country. This really shows a need to strengthen the learning assessment, as I said, and in order to monitor the SDG 4 progress overall. Emphasis on learning assessment is also evident from the upcoming Arab Regional Learning Loss Report. Some of you may know UNESCO worked with the World Bank and UNICEF to come up with this report on the learning loss. And this report is expected to be launched in December, so we haven't disseminated yet. But there are a variety of assessments that needs to be conducted systematically, periodically, and at adequate timings. The timing is really important to recover and to also build back better from the COVID-19 impact on education. So the Arab Learning Assessment Framework is essential, of course, and potentially the trigger to really be able to focus like the other regions, as Akmara mentioned earlier, and really overcome the prolonged issue of learning poverty in the region overall. So, but finally, I just wanted to make a point. I thank ABEX for our partnership in organizing this event. Thank you so much. And for all the speakers that will stimulate very rich discussion today. I trust that it will be a very useful and very inspiring, hopefully, event for you all. Thank you so much.
Shukran, dear Hannah, and again, much appreciated that you can now and devote time for us despite your busy schedule and being on mission. In the agenda, we should also listen now to Dr. Abdul Salam Al-Jufi, the senior advisor to ABEX, but he's in a concurrent session, and if he can, he will join in a little bit later. So we again would like to thank Dr. Jufi personally and ABEX for their kind support, and they are long-term partners, and they will also contribute substantively in the follow-up process to help us, including with the translation of this learning assessment framework into Arabic, so that we can share with all the colleagues who are interested in the region. As said, for now, the learning assessment framework is in English only, and I shared it twice in the chat function. So for those who don't have it yet, although we shared it with our networks with the invitation and the concept note and agenda. So with this being said, I will now give the floor to our star of the meeting, Dr. Karma Al-Hassan, our, let's say, guest star, to share the main ideas that are comprised in this learning assessment framework, to also explain why we thought developing this learning assessment framework, and then to have a chance to understand more about what is the learning assessment framework for. So Dr. Karma Hassan, she's also a long-term friend of our office and of UNESCO, moreover. She's an expert in education, especially in the fields of assessment and evaluation of both learning outcomes, but also institutional evaluation. And we worked with her for long, also in higher education, for quality issues, quality assurance. So she's with the Arab University in Beirut, in Lebanon, but also doing a lot of international work. She's a high-level international expert, and we appreciate also very much her time and her availability to respond to our demands for cooperation. And we are very happy she could do this work now for almost 2 years, because the framework started like in December 2019. We started then thinking about this framework and developing an outline and trying to figure out what this framework could help with. So Karma, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Takmara. Thank you for this very, very warm welcome. And thank you, UNESCO Regional Office, for holding this webinar on this very important topic. You know, hearing our colleagues from UNESCO headquarters and what they're doing globally and internationally really makes this even more useful and more needy in the Arab region. A lot of work on assessment is going on in the Arab region, but it's still more needs to be done, and it needs to be sort of institutionalized, and it requires a framework. And that's why we think now that having an Arab learning assessment framework is a very timely and very needed matter. And we hope that this, as Dakmara mentioned, this is a work in progress. This is we are just introducing it, and this will go into further discussions and input from colleagues and all stakeholders. And we hope that these discussions will enrich the document to be able to have it as a final document later on in March in 2022. What I'll be doing in these 15-20 minutes, I will just focus on the role and the need for a learning assessment framework in the Arab region, and go very quickly over the document and how we hope that this will move forward with time. You know, it is very important to have a framework. And really, a framework basically ensures that there is, sometimes it's called a document, sometimes it's a set of understanding, conceptual understandings, or a mindset, but really it ensures consistent terminology to be able to communicate what are the purposes and what are the characteristics of a certain learning assessment system. We view an assessment framework as very holistic, involving a set of coordinated arrangements. And we need to have coordinated arrangements because they build on the interdependence of the different parts of the system to generate complementarities. We want to avoid duplication, and we want to prevent inconsistencies. And having a framework really will ensure that we avoid inconsistencies, we avoid duplication, and we ensure complementarity among the various parts of a system. And having a framework will offer some kind of a structured conceptual map, will act as a reference guide, as a common language between us and between everyone working on the system, and a set of understandings. Like in curriculum, we have a curriculum framework that details what is to be taught. An assessment framework also details, first of all, what are the concepts that will be involved in assessment, that will be included in the assessment, and definitely their definitions. Then when I'm using one kind of assessment and my colleagues are using it, then we are in agreement. What are the different purposes? And we know there are many and multiple purposes of assessment. Basically, what theoretical assumptions we are adopting, and these are very important too. Definitely now it's a learning outcome, it's an outcome-based system, and what are the outcomes that are expected from an education system, an assessment system, and how can we operationalize the various components of the assessment system, which means a framework in brief really includes both the theory and the practice, and explains what to do in terms of assessment and how to do it. And that's why it is very important to have a framework to enhance communication and to have a common set of understandings regarding what is to be assessed and how it is to be assessed. Now, as mentioned before, the learning assessment framework for the Arab region would serve many purposes. I'm going to focus first on the global, or on the macro level, and then I will go more specifically into the micro level of the roles of an assessment framework. As mentioned by our colleague, Ms. Hannah, from Unesco Beirut, really providing assessment and data fits in very well with UNESCO's SDG 4 framework for action. As the system-wide alignment of the different components, this is the core of an assessment framework, to have an alignment of the different components. This definitely will enhance the achievement of SDG 4 targets. SDG 4 targets, as mentioned, focus on literacy, focus on transversal competencies, on preparing students for work, for life. It is not only just basic outcomes, and providing and having an assessment framework that provides reliable and valid data definitely will help to achieve the SDG 4 targets. Similarly, many of our countries have national assessments and national assessment strategies, and having a framework for that definitely will contribute to more accurate, valid, and reliable information on on our learners' achievements, their challenges, and accordingly provide diagnosis, reliable diagnosis of the education system and its different components. And more than ever now, after what we have been going through in the pandemic and the post-pandemic and the changes and the challenges that we faced, having really a reliable learning assessment framework, a comprehensive one, will help us mitigate the major impact on education system that the COVID-19 pandemic brought about. And as mentioned also by our colleagues from UNESCO, having a learning assessment framework will contribute immensely to policy making, and it can contribute in the early stages and in the monitoring evaluation stages. We can better assess the quality of education and the weaknesses of an education system, and we can make use of these in the policy formulation stages, probably like in policies like standard setting, the different weight for different components of the curriculum, and so on. Definitely also when we have a reliable and a comprehensive learning assessment framework that really provides data at the segregated data, the data by socioeconomic level, by geographic location, by gender. We can really identify the issues that we have within a system, and we can make use of this information to design and target interventions to deal with the disadvantaged or the vulnerable groups. And of course, as also mentioned, having reliable assessment framework can act as an accountability tool, both for internal and external accountability. And this would be very useful in the final stage of the policy process, the monitoring and evaluation stage. So as you can see, we need, I'm sorry, but I don't know what happened. As you can see, we need to have a learning assessment framework for the Arab region, as it serves multiple and many purposes. This is at the macro level. At the micro level, having a learning assessment framework really advocates that, as I mentioned before, many of our countries have national assessments and systems. But when we have a framework, it will help us in better defining the strategies, the assessment strategies that will be within that framework. Also, it will also help us agree on what are the best practices or the best principles for effective assessment. And here we have listed, a number of the latest recommendations for quality assessment. It should be fit for purpose, transparent, reliable, valid, inclusion, alignment. It should be aligned with teaching and learning, and with it's a whole learner approach. We don't only focus on, we focus on literacies, we focus on preparing students for life, for work, on the social emotional aspect, and so we consider all dimensions of learning, and we use different types of assessment tools, and they all should complement each other. So definitely, whenever we have a learning assessment framework, it will definitely help agreeing on what kind of practices we want to have and what kind of principles we would like to adopt in our framework. It also encourages classroom and teacher-based formative assessment, and we saw how useful these were during the pandemic. the classroom and teacher-based assessment. It helps to also engage learners and to develop self and peer assessment. And this is very important. And we relied also a lot on this during the pandemic. And of course, promote the usage of new technologies to perform effective and reliable assessment. And we had to be familiar with many types of technologies, new technologies, and new innovative and alternative ways of assessment we were exposed to during the pandemic. When we started working on this document, we really had some underlying principles that we believed in, and we really wanted to make sure that these principles really are, the document is based on them and focuses on them. Basically, we wanted the document or the framework, I'm not going to call it a document, it's a mindset, basically we wanted to provide conceptual understanding of what is the latest trend in learning assessment, at the same time to be a practical guide for policymakers, assessment practitioners, and we wanted, as I mentioned before, to provide the what and the how. A main conceptual belief and focus of the document basically is the need for a system-wide alignment of the education components. This is really I think the main base on which we believe there needs to be alignment between curriculum, teaching, learning, practices, assessment, teacher professional development, the textbooks, alignment, horizontal alignment and vertical across levels. And this is essential. And this is a focal assumption and underlying principle underlying the document. We also wanted the document to advocate the latest in thinking regarding learning assessment and regarding teaching and learning assessment and to focus. And accordingly, this will be a document in progress because we're always having new approaches, new techniques, new tools, and we hope that through this process we will keep updating the document to reflect the latest in thinking and teaching, learning, how students learn, and accordingly how they should be assessed, and with the advances on technology and so on. And because we had to stop during the pandemic, we really wanted to make sure that this document presents an updated understanding of and approach to learning assessment as it has been affected by the post-pandemic, and the new possibilities that the new technologies and the alternative ways of assessment that are offering us now. So these were basically four underlying principles that we hope that this framework will really will focus on and will emphasize. Now, the document, I don't know if all of you had the chance to go through it. It's a lengthy document, and but I'm going to go just briefly over it now, just to give you an orientation. And as the title of the seminar, the webinar is Introducing the Learning Assessment Framework. We started with really giving a background context on basically on what UNESCO has been doing, the learning assessment within UNESCO's SDG framework for action, and the kind of the changes in how in the theories how students learn, and accordingly the UNESCO's adopted integrated conceptualization of learning and the review of integrated development. And this is the basis on which SDGs were developed, and especially the SDG 4. And so we have a background on this because this really affects this belief in this conceptual belief in how students learn, and our new view of learning and so on really is very much aligned and with with how we should assess accordingly. And that's why we went into detail into that. And then what UNESCO and the partners, already we heard by our colleagues from head office and in Beirut regional office, what UNESCO and UNICEF and the World Bank and the other partners are doing to promote learning assessment and to enhance learning assessment globally and regionally. And then the document describes the uses and role of a learning assessment framework. And I already mentioned some of that in my presentation. And then we went into the concept of learning assessment, and we really went into how it is evolving and what are the latest principles and the latest trends in learning assessment, and of course the effect of the pandemic and how the new tools that were used and emphasized during the pandemic and the use of technology and so on. And that's really the conceptual part of the document. And then we went into if we really want to design a learning assessment framework, how do we go about it? Step by step, from the vision to establishing the governance structure, to how the steps to make it operational, and then to train teacher capacity building for that, and then how to prepare a mechanism for making use of the results, and then finally the evaluation and the monitoring and evaluation of this framework. So we go step, and examples are provided, in this practical side of the framework. Of course, what is happening at the regional level also is being covered, and then with conclusions based on what we have found out in the document. Also, we included some sample learning assessment frameworks or strategies for some Arab countries. They're not really representative. We just, we included them. And this can, as I mentioned before, the document is dynamic and will constantly be upgraded and updated with new information and with your input. And we do have a really a set of selected resources and references for learning outcome, that for learning assessment, that are really very, very useful. And we hope to build this resource list of resources and references to help in learning outcome assessment. So this is in brief what is involved in the document. I hope that you will be able to read it, and we are looking forward to hearing the comments and the feedback based on the document. Now, how do we move forward? We all know there is a lot of work on assessment is being done. We need to really try and develop a framework for it and adopt a framework for it. And we hope that this document is the first step in that direction. This is, as I mentioned, a document for discussion, work in progress. We're looking forward to receiving input from various stakeholders, and those in assessment, to inform and to better develop and update the document. And as Nakmara mentioned, we hope that there will, in the period between January and March, there will be 1 or 2 webinars to discuss to get the comments and to further update and revise the document. We hope that this will really, this collaboration and discussion and communication will help establish a community of practice for those working in learning assessment for the Arab region. As mentioned by our colleagues from headquarters, we don't have one yet in the Arab region, such a community of practice to discuss and share experiences and best practices and learn from each other and so on. So we hope this is a target we have, and accordingly we hope to establish an online platform which would really be a host the comments and the feedback that you hope to provide on the document. We will post the LIF and we will revise it, and it will also include a listing of learning assessment resources and references and best practices and exemplars. So we hope that this would really result in regional contribution to learning assessment. As I mentioned, it's a work in progress. We hope it's going to be a dynamic process, and we hope at the end that we can have a culture of assessment that is really evidence-based and that really relies on evidence, and that is continuously evolving and changing depending on the new trends in learning and in assessment. Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, Dr. Karma, thank you very much. Shukran. We are also very happy because of your excellent timekeeping and of course the brilliant overview of this draft learning assessment framework. I have a good friend who works in Australia, but he also worked a lot with UNESCO, and we work together on curriculum frameworks in different countries. And his definition of a framework is quite funny. He always says a framework is a framework, you know. I mean, a framework is meant to pull together, to actually bring together the different bits and pieces that pertain to a certain area, in our case, learning assessment. And as Dr. Karma said, sometimes countries, they develop a document that is a learning assessment or a curriculum framework. But sometimes it's a mindset. It's more like a set of rules, of principles, of practices, of values that people share, and based on that, their policies and practices are being developed and improved. We will put in place, set the process of consultation on the basis of this draft framework. That needs to be enriched, and during this presentation of Dr. Karma, we also received a lot of comments, including about people requesting examples. For instance, how can technology contribute to learning assessment, or what are the new trends in learning assessment? So we'll try to enrich such examples that are part of the framework. But for now, during this webinar, we invited different guests from the region who will also share their experiences and will contribute, including to responding to these questions about how technology can be used in learning assessment, and what are, for instance, the challenges in learning assessment, but also some possible solutions and responses. So our first speaker is from Jordan, Mrs. Shireen Hamed. She's the Dean of Princess Sarwat Community College and a member of the Education Board of the Minister of Education of Jordan, and also of the Curriculum Board. So she has a long experience in education, and she will talk about performance-based assessment in Jordan, and especially the lessons Jordan learned from the pandemic. So Dr. Shireen, floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Dr. Dakmara. مساء الخير أو صباح الخير للزملاء والزميلات. بداية أتوجه بالشكر الكبير والجزيل لمكتب اليونسكو في بيروت على تنظيم هذه الورشة أو الويبينار أونلاين. والحقيقة أود أن أتوجه بالشكر أيضا الجزيل لمكتب التربية على الجهود التي يبذلها. مكتب التربية لدول الخليج هو علامة فارقة، دول مجلس التعاون علامة فارقة في التربية والتعليم بالممارسات والسياسات في المنطقة العربية، وكان له أثر كبير خلال الجائحة الحقيقة في تثقيف المجتمع التربوي حول كيفية الاستجابة. فالشكر الجزيل لمديره ولكادره. أود أيضا أن أشكر الزميلة الدكتورة كارما، وأشيد بإطار تقييم التعلم في المنطقة العربية الذي تحدثت عنه على حسن التنظيم، الشمولية، هو مترابط الأفكار، حداثي، بسيط اللغة. وأود أن أدعو الزملاء والزميلات التربويين والتربويات، مدراء المدارس، جميع من هم معنا اليوم، إلى ضرورة أن قراءة هذا الإطار وتفحصه وعقد ورشات على المستوى الوطني في وزارات التربية والتعليم، حتى يحصل جزء من المواءمة لمحتوياته، لأن هذا الإطار النظري عظيم، يمكن مواءمة محتوياته للسياق الوطني والعمل قليلا قليلا، بحيث يكون خلال فترة معينة هناك إطار وطني وقاعدة مشتركة من الفهم لكيفية تطبيقه على أرض الواقع. وأرحب بالزملاء التربويين والأكاديميين. الحقيقة قبل الحديث عن التجربة، وسأتحدث عن تجربة كلية الأميرة ثروت الجامعية المتوسطة، وهي تجربة يعني ممتعة، والآن سأخبركم لماذا. لكن قبل الحديث عن أي نوع من أنواع وأشكال ومستويات تقييم التعلم، لابد أن يكون هناك، أن يعلم الجميع، يجب أن يكون هناك فلسفة وفهم من أين ننطلق بالتقييم. التقييم ليس عبارة هو فقط عن رصد درجات للطلاب، أو نشوف الطلاب حافظين ولا مش حافظين، فاهمين ولا مش فاهمين. هناك فلسفة يجب أن ينطلق منها التقييم. للتقييم موقع مهم جدا في دورة التعليم. يجب أن نسأل أي شخص يريد أن يقيم، يجب أن يسأل نفسه سؤال: لماذا نقيم؟ ماذا نقيم؟ هذه الأسئلة تساعد كثيرا الشخص الذي سيقوم بعملية التقييم. اليوم أنا سأتحدث عن التقييم المعتمد على الأداء، والتقييم المعتمد على الأداء يتحدث عنه الأدب التربوي خلال ربما آخر 10 سنوات، لكن لم نشعر بأهميته وجدواه وعائده على التعليم إلا خلال الجائحة. والجائحة يعني على كل الآثار والتبعات النفسية والاجتماعية والاقتصادية التي وضعتها علينا، لكنها أجبرتنا أن نخرج من منطقة الراحة، من الكومفورت زون، في عمليات التقييم والتعلم. التقييم المعتمد على الأداء هو تقييم لأجل الحياة، لأنه أنت لا تقيم المعارف فقط، أنت تقيم المهارات، تقيم قدرات الطلاب. لذلك هو بمضمونه ينسجم ويلتقي مع ال SDG 4 بشكل كبير، لأن الهدف الرابع من أهداف التنمية المستدامة يركز على أن التعليم هو تعليم لأجل الحياة، وهو تعليم أيضا مستدام. التقييم المعتمد على الأداء هو منحى واقعي، وهو منحى شمولي وحقيقي، authentic assessment. أنت تصبر غور الطفل أو المتعلم لتعلم ماذا يستطيع أن يفعل، وما الذي يمتلكه حقيقة من أشياء ومهارات يستطيع أن يستخدمها في سياقات تعليمية. فهو أيضا كمان فرصة للجميع. الآن ما هو التقييم؟ يعني قبل لا أنتقل للتجربة، التقييم هو قياس، والقياس هو العملية التي تحدد كمية ما يوجد في الشيء من خاصية أو سمة. إذا نحن نقوم بعملية قياس. في هذا القياس نجمع بيانات عن تعلم الطلبة، نجمع بيانات عن السياقات التعليمية، عن التفاعلات في إذا نحن نتكلم، أو هو يعطينا صورة عن كيف وماذا يتعلم الطلبة. الآن ونحن نتحول لعصر المعلوماتية وما بعد كوفيد وجميع التعقيدات التي نمر فيها، نتذكر أنه إحنا في المدرسة المعرفية علينا أن ندخل لنعرف ماذا يوجد بداخل عقل المتعلم ونفسه، كيف تتفاعل الأشياء بداخله ويتفاعل التعلم، ويستطيع أن يصعد إلى المهارات العليا، طبعا على أهمية المعرفة. الآن سأحدثكم عن تجربتنا في كلية الأميرة ثروت الجامعية المتوسطة. هي كلية للبنات الطالبات، ومهم جدا أن تعرفوا أنه كليتنا هي كلية بسيطة جدا من حيث الموارد، لأنه زي ما بنعرف لما نتكلم عن التقييم المعتمد على الأداء في عصر التكنولوجيا تحتاج إلى ثمن، التكنولوجيا تحتاج إلى نفقات ورصد موازنات. الآن كليتنا تستهدف الطالبات القادمات من أسر محدودة الدخل، فببداية الجائحة الإنترنت كان إشي بالنسبة لنا غريب، الأجهزة حتى أجهزة الخلوي والموبايلات ما كانت موجودة مع معظم الطالبات، و75% من طالباتنا يدرسون بواسطة الجهاز، رغم أنه إحنا بنتحدث عن تجربة كلية جامعية متوسطة، بمعنى أنها بعد الثانوية العامة، وهناك تخصصية. هناك بعض التخصصات على سبيل المثال مثل التصميم الجرافيكي، يعني ما بتقدر تتخيل تصميم جرافيكي بدون جهاز كمبيوتر مثلا. ولكن يعني بعد سنتين الآن من الانقطاع عن التعليم، والتعليم اللي كان أونلاين، يعني نقول أن الكورونا عندما داهمتنا ونحن غير مستعدين، لا مستعدين كمدرسين إلى أن نواجه عملية التدريس، ولا أن نعد ولا أن نحاضر ولا أن نتواصل ولا أن نتعامل مع طلابنا عن طريق التكنولوجيا. الآن بدأنا بتذويق تجربتنا في التدريس، أدوات بسيطة، أبليكيشنز بسيطة، ما كان عندنا منصة تعلم، ما كان عندنا بلاتفورم للتعلم. استعنا بالمنصات المجانية مثلا جوجل إديوكيشن، عملنا غرف وصفوف افتراضية. هذا بشهر 3 2020 عندما بدأت الكورونا. ذوقنا تجربتنا بحسب طبيعة المساق. زي ما بتعرفوا المساقات والمعطيات تختلف، هناك مساقات نظرية، هناك مساقات عملية بالكامل، هناك مساقات مدمجة بين النظري والعملي. الآن الأجزاء العملية أجلت بعض الشيء عندما كانت الجائحة في أوجها. الآن في هذه الظروف، ونحن كنا نؤمن كاملا بثقافة الامتحان أو ثقافة التقييم بواسطة القلم والورقة، لم نجد مفرا من التقييم المعتمد على الأداء. لجأنا له فأعاننا لأعمال الفصل. كانت أزواتنا بسيطة، تصوير فيديو، تسجيل صوتي، كتابة أحيانا للمهام والواجبات المطلوبة بخط اليد، والتصوير وإرسال الصور للمدرس ليقوم بتصحيحها. بدأنا ببناء قدرات فريقنا، كنا نعقد لأعضاء هيئة التدريس جلسات تعليم أونلاين. فهموا إيش يعني تقييم معتمد على الأداء، ما معنى معايير، كيف ننشئ روبريك، كيف نضمن العدالة، كيف نضمن ما أشارت له الدكتورة كارما، كيف نضمن ثبات القياس، ثبات عملية التقييم، صدق عملية التقييم بالفعل. والحمد لله يعني استطعنا خلال هذه الجائحة، خصوصا الفترة اللي كان فيها تسكير كامل، إنه نتعلم ونعلم ونتفاعل ونتواصل مع طالباتنا ومع أسرهم. كان عندنا مشكلة بالإنترنت، كنا نزود بناتنا بفترة الامتحانات ببندلز من الإنترنت حتى ما نفقدهم، حتى يضلوا موجودين معنا. طبعا واجهتنا مشكلة واجهت الجميع يعلم عنها، اللي هي لما بيكون الامتحان هو عبارة عن امتحان مثلا مدته نصف ساعة فصلي أو نهائي، يعني لا يستطيع، إذا لم يكن هناك كاميرا وسيت اب معين، لا نستطيع القول إنه والله الطالب هو نفسه أو نسبة الغش يعني لا يمكن ضبطها حقيقة، وهذه بكل السياقات. لكن كنا دائما نعاير العلامة بأعمال الفصل عن طريق التقييم المعتمد على الأداء. وأود هنا أن أشير إلى أنه إحنا عندنا بالأردن على مستوى الشهادة الجامعية المتوسطة عندنا امتحان مركزي بعد السنتين، يعني ليس فقط علامة الكلية أو درجات الكلية، وإنما عندنا امتحان مركزي يعقد من قبل جامعة تشرف على جميع كليات المجتمع. وهذا الامتحان المركزي بالنسبة لنا كان تحدي كبير، لأن لما العلامات بتكون عندنا وبيننا مقدور عليها، لكن لما طالباتنا بدهم يجلسوا لامتحان مركزي وياخذوا شهادة فيه حتى يستطيعوا تبريدجينج إنهم يعني يجسروا في المرحلة الجامعية، هون التحدي الأكبر. يعني هيك ملاحظة عامة، ليس تقييما عميقا ولكن كملاحظات وأوبزرفيشن. بقدر أقول لكم إنه بالسنة الأولى كانت نسبة النجاح بالامتحان السنة الأولى من الجائحة 85%. بالسنة الثانية انخفضت نسبة النجاح قليلا، صارت 75%، وهذا احنا بنيقنه انه في فاقد تعليمي كبير جدا لما كان التعليم بشكل كامل اونلاين. ولكن برضه استطعنا بكل هاي الظروف ان نعلم ونتعلم. باخر دقيقة يمكن زي ما أشرت لي صديقتي الدكتورة دكمارة، الدروس المستفادة من تجربة التعليم. في التقييم لأجل التعلم هناك ضرورة لمواءمة الظروف للحصول على معلومات حول تعلم الطالب من خلال أدائه، التقييم المعتمد على الأداء. غير هيك ما عندك أي وسيلة. المتعلم وأسرته هم شركاء، يعني شو عرفنا؟ المتعلم والأسرة هم شركاء في عملية التعلم. أنت سواء كنت بتحكي عن طالب في المرحلة الأساسية أو في المرحلة الثانوية أو في المرحلة الجامعية، الأسرة الآن صارت موجودة معك في عملية التعلم. لذلك الطالب مسؤول عن تعلمه وعليه أن يعي ذلك. الوازع الأخلاقي الداخلي، الإثكس المتعلقة بعمليات الغش، هذه يجب أن تمزج بالوعي. يجب العمل على الجزء هذا من الطلاب. نتخلى قليلا عن ثقافة الدرجة والعلامة. أنت تتعلم حتى تستطيع أن تعيش في الحياة. مؤسسة ثقافة التقييم المعتمد على الأداء، أشارت الزميلة هنا في البداية في بداية الافتتاح، وأشارت الدكتورة كرمة أن المنطقة العربية، ويعني أنا مطلعة على الوضع في المنطقة العربية، نحتاج إلى مؤسسة ثقافة التقييم المعتمد على الأداء بالتدريب، برفع الوعي، ببناء القدرات للمعلمين، أن نذهب للمعلمين ونبني لهم قدراتهم، وننشر قصص النجاح. لدينا كثير من قصص النجاح في المنطقة العربية، لكننا لا ننشر هذه القصص. وأختم حتى لا يعني أخذ من دور أخي وزميلي الدكتور عبد الله، وأقول ما عدا التغيير متغير، علينا دائما أن نكون مستعدين للجديد وللمفاجآت في عصر المعلوماتية. وشكرا جزيلا لكم جميعا.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Shireen Hamed, for this very insightful presentation that made us think again about what do we need to assess, what kind of skills, what kind of student achievements are we targeting, and how can we do that, especially in the difficult context like the one that was actually brought about with the COVID-19 pandemic. Before giving the floor to our next speaker, Dr. Abdullah Al-Khateh from Saudi Arabia, I would like now to offer Dr. Abdul Salam Al-Jufi the chance to talk to the audience, because he's now able to join us for the webinar. So Dr. Al-Jufi, if you're with us, please.
شكرا دكتورة. أنا فقط سوف أتكلم حتى يستعد الدكتور عبد الله بعرضه الذي نحن منتظرين له، وشكرا أيضا للعروض السابقة، وشكرا لك أيضا دكتورة على هذا العمل الرائع. والحقيقة نحن في مكتبة التربية العربية لدول الخليج ننظر إلى أن التعليم هي عملية اجتماعية. طالما هي عملية اجتماعية، إذا التقييم لابد أن يكون تقييم ليس تحصيلي فقط، ولكنه تقييم للمهارات الاجتماعية والثقافية، ومهارات أيضا العمل، والمهارات المطلوبة من العملية التربوية التعليمية. وبالتالي القضية بالنسبة لنا هي قضية نظرتنا الفلسفية للتعليم. مشكلتنا أنه استمرينا لفترات طويلة في المنطقة العربية ننظر للتعليم على أنه معارف وعلى أنه مهارات معرفية، وبالتالي كان الجهد الأكبر لقضايا التقويم تنصب حول موضوع واحد، وهو قياس المعرفة، الكم المعرفي، التحصيل الدراسي. كان هذا هو الأساس، وأهملنا الجانب الاجتماعي والجانب المهاري في الموضوع. لهذا ربما أن قياساتنا التي تقول، أو القياسات الدولية التي تدرس الدراسات الدولية واسعة النطاق مثل بيزا وبيرز وتيمس، والتي تقول على أن هناك جودة التعليم في المنطقة العربية منخفض، ربما عائد إلى ثقافة الاختبارات والقياسات التي نقوم بها في مدارسنا وفي وزارتنا. لهذا أنا أضم صوتي إلى ما قيل في البداية للسيدة هنا وكاميلا، وأيضا شيرين أختي العزيزة الذي أشكرها أيضا على إشادتها مكتب التربية. وأقول على أنه نحن في مكتب التربية حاولنا بالجاهدين أن نعمل فعاليات مشتركة مع الOECD، مع الIAA، لكي ننشر ثقافة ماذا تعني عملية التقييمات. ما هو المقصود به؟ عملنا ما هو التقويم التكويني، التقويم البنائي، عملنا ايضا التقويم المصاحب، عملنا التقويم التتابع، عملنا ايضا يعني حاولنا بقدر الامكان، نشرنا ايضا، عملنا مجال تعريب واسع النطاق، ونقلنا افضل الممارسات الدوليه الى اللغه العربيه، وبالتالي عندنا ايضا نطاق واسع من العمل في هذا المجال. ومشاركتنا وسعدنا جدا مشاركتنا مع اليونسكو بيروت في التنسيق لهذه الفعاليه. اشكر اليونسكو بيروت واشكر دكمارة على وجه الخصوص على جهدها، وشكرا جزيلا. انا اعتقد دكتور عبد الله الان جاهز.
Yes, thank you so much, Dr. Al-Jufi, for these kind words. Dr. Abdul Salam Al-Jufi is also esteemed member of the Global Steering Committee for SDG 4 with ABEX. So they are doing a lot of work at both regional and global level with regard to implementing the Agenda 2030. And Dr. Al-Jufi and ABEX, of course, they are our partners in different projects. And we are very happy that we can also bring in the perspective of different countries of the region through their efforts in the Gulf area, but also in the broader Arab region. So shukran again, Dr. Al-Jufi. And now, this being said, I am very happy to introduce to our audience Dr. Abdul Al-Kataye. I hope I pronounced your name correctly. If not, please correct me. And to invite our distinguished guest from the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia to share their experiences with regard to improving assessment and measurement. And this is also an opportunity for us to deal again with different concepts, because we talk about assessment, evaluation, measurement, and these terms are of course related. They have also different connotations for different countries or different experts, but we try of course to also share a common understanding, and I'm sure Dr. Al-Kataye, he will help us reach this common understanding. So the floor is yours.
Thank you, Dr. Nikamara. And I think, can you see the?
Yes, we can now.
Okay, I think it's, but I cannot, let me see if I could move it. Okay, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody, wherever you are. We are here at this fine webinar. I think we have learned a lot from the speakers at the before me. I'm just gonna talk about our vision about the assessment and for what. We think one of the important thing is to have a holistic assessment, not just in one segment of the lifetime of a learner, but throughout his lifespan. So the National Center for Assessment, it's totally devoted to assessment and measurement, and this is the structure of the center. We have a vision to be leaders in measurement and evaluation, and we rely on a comprehensive solution for our beneficiaries. Those are some of the goals of our center, just to satisfy the needs of the people, the institution, share things with civil services, and be in a position to be in a leading position nationally. But once said that, as I said from the beginning, that we really rely heavily on how to serve the people, our students, through the lifetime with the measures that assess their potentials, their needs, their deficiency. So we could, the Ministry of Education or other, institution, they could serve them better. So, as you can see from the starting point, from the, early grades, we have assessment, for aptitude, قدراتي، لدينا الاختبار القدراتي، الاختبارات التكوينية التتابعية. Those are, especially الاختبارات التكوينية التتابعية, which is the formative assessment. It's a diagnostic in nature that could be used with, the teacher could use it for diagnostic purposes, and the superintendent can use it for evaluation of the performance of, of the classes, teachers, and also the ministry could use it for the comparison between schools. So, and this runs from grade 1 until grade 12. We have also مقياس الموهبة للمستويات الدراسية. We have, gifted and talented, 3rd grade. We have an adaptive IQ that starts with age 5, and we have also the Arab gifted and talented instrument. For the 4th, 6th, and 7th, 4, 5, and 6 grades, we have also قدراتي, we have اختبارات التكوينية, formative assessment, and we have national assessment for outcome, national outcome assessment, gifted and talented, and IQ, and the Arab. So those kind of assessment, it goes year by year from grade 1 until grade 6. At the secondary school, we have also an aptitude test, قدراتي 3, and we have also the as I said, informative assessment, national assessment, and a gifted and talented assessment, and an IQ. At the high school level, we have an aptitude test, an achievement-oriented test. We have the GAT, and SAAT, which is an achievement test. We have also the formative assessment for outcome learning, and we have interest inventories. The purpose of those, most of those, is twofold. One is to, assess the potentials and the deficiency of the students at the high school level, and 2 of them are used for the admission also, admission at the university level. So one of the main concept of this is to equity, fairness, and objectivity of the assessment that leads to admission at the university. So those are, the most important things in the high school area. After the high school, at the university level, we have 2 tests. That one is the outcome, learning outcome, which is at the end of the university levels. We have a skill of the 21st century, and we have a post-grad GAT. One of the things that Dr. Abdussalam mentioned is the lack of the assessment of skills, and we do believe in the importance of skills across across the lifespan of the people. So we thought this important thing we have developed. We have first of all identified 27 skills that are top of the list across the world, and then we start, building an assessment tool for those skills, and we use it with the university students. The intention is when a student finishes the school, university, and he get his degree, he will get also a certificate of skills that he is, achieved, and in doing so, that would give him a better chance to be recruited in a position that fits his skills and potentials. After university, we have also the licensure test for teachers, engineers, and accountant, and also at those are all cognitive ones. Proficiency, we have one for اختبار القدرة المعرفية. It's a test that is used for hiring and promoting all civil service employee. We have a leadership assessment tool, some other that related to specific population or specific agencies. And we also have an inventory for career preference inventory, and we have an assessment for middle career, some kind of for the lower than high university employee. With all of that, we have also a non-cognitive tests. Those are, مقياس الاستعداد الأسري, which is related to the potential of the family-oriented requirement, and we have developmental tools, personality, the big five, and we have مقياس سفير. Safir is for the people who usually study outside or have and work outside the kingdom. Those has to be selected carefully with regard to the personality stability, openness, communication with other people from different cultures, and so on. So we at the center really have tools and assessment that could help the people and the institution to achieve a better understanding, whether it's in education or in career orientation, from an early age until until then one is using some kind of helper. Okay. One of the other things that really maybe it doesn't fit well with that, and the intention was for a global use, is the language tests. We have an Arabic language test for non-Arabic speaking, and we have another one for Arabic speaking test, and we have an English version of it's a STEP, which is standardized test for English, which is really rely heavily on the CFR. Those are, our ambition is to expand our partnership locally and internationally, expand our tools in the non-cognitive area, and we, increase the seating, and try to move from paper and pencil toward computerized testing in the near future. this is just a summary of our, test development. It's, grown up rapidly since we start. And this is the, population that we, the people who, a graph of people that we test annually. We usually do more than 3 million tests per year. And those are, the beneficiary from universities, from ministries, and from institutions and big companies across the kingdom. And we have also, some beneficiaries from other countries, like, in Emirate, Kuwait, Bahrain, Egypt, and Sudan, and Jordan. They usually, some of the students who have high school here, they require, in order to be admitted at their universities, they have to have our tests. One of the good things that we are trying to achieve is to expand the culture of assessment and evaluation, and promote quality control all over the institutions, and emphasize fairness and equity and proficiency, and also, increase the positive attitude of competitiveness through our kids through their life span. Thank you.
Shukran jazilan, Dr. Al-Katayev, for this presentation. We hear also the translator, I don't know why. Is it okay now? I think so. So thank you once more for this very rich presentation, and for bringing to our minds this concept of learning assessment as a lifelong endeavor. And you also mentioned a very important thing, the role of strong institutions at national level that can support such lifelong learning assessment. And you gave a lot of examples about the type of assessments that you perform according to different purposes, and how this assessment can be complementary, how the different types of assessment can complement one another, and also the partnerships you are seeking out in order to improve these assessment strategies and make them more relevant for learners. And last but not least, you mentioned your focus, your increased focus on assessing what is called usually non-cognitive skills. I don't like necessarily the term non-cognitive, because all is a sort of cognition, but these are the skills, of course, that are associated with social and emotional learning. And thank you also for bridging this discussion that will now follow on how to assess social and emotional learning, or the so-called soft skills, or the 21st century skills. And I have to say that in my experience in different countries, not just in the Arab region, one main challenge is people always share is about the difficulty in assessing these soft skills, or the social emotional skills. Apparently, assessing knowledge and knowledge-related issues is easier, although we know it's not that easy, and we should also be very careful about how we assess knowledge and the cognitive dimension. So thank you once more for helping us to switch now to the next discussion. And I invite Mrs. Momo Düring from UNICEF Menaro in Amman to share her presentation on how to assess the so-called life skills. And Momo Düring, she's an education program specialist for UNICEF for quite a long time. And she was involved in this big regional initiative of UNICEF, Life Skills and Global Citizenship. So Momo, if you're with us, please then take over.
Thank you so much, Dagmara, and warm greetings from Amman to everybody. As Dagmara mentioned, I'm working with the UNICEF Regional Office, but what I'm going to present here is really on behalf of different organizations, different countries. So I'm just a messenger. And I'm trying to use a mixed approach. So while I'm going to speak in English, I will share my screen and show the presentation in Arabic. And also just to highlight the presentation as well as any other links I will share later on in the chat are always available in English and Arabic. So let me share my screen. Can everybody see?
Yes,
Great.
yes, fine.
Okay, as Dagmara mentioned, I'm going to present an instrument that doesn't measure knowledge, that doesn't measure subject matters, but really focuses on measuring life skills or those soft skills or transferable skills, or often called 21st century skills. And this under the joint regional initiative across UN organizations, ministries of education, and other partners on fostering life skills and citizenship education, short LSCE. So the LSCE measurement instrument I'm going to present here has been specifically designed for the Middle East and North Africa region. So the design as well as the testing has happened in the region to make sure that it's really contextualized to the needs here across the region, especially also to consider that when we talk about life skills, like creativity, critical thinking, empathy, etc., and especially measuring those life skills, the context, the situation, as well as the language has to be very, very close to the everyday life. And so therefore we focused on having a contextual and specifically designed for the instrument for the region. And I think this also reflects on different questions I have seen in the Q&A and has been mentioned by other speakers. So just quickly on the importance of life skills, and Dagmara mentioned already, often called 21st century skills, soft skills, etc., are those skills, attributes, and values essential to succeed in school, work, and life. So it's not just about academic outcomes, but really those skills that enable success in life beyond school. Those life skills are the central clue also for other skills that have been mentioned before. Foundational skills, literacy, numeracy, job-specific skills, as well as on entrepreneurial competencies. And the situation we have been in the past 2 years, the COVID pandemic and its impact on children and young people has further stressed the importance of life skills. For children and young people to navigate anxiety and foster resilience and empathy, to develop critical thinking skills in context of the infodemic or fake news, and to build self-management and communication capacity of those children in times of remote and blended learning. So the instrument I'm going to present builds on the life skills and citizenship education framework that has been launched, I think, back in 2017, which mainly reflects on 4 dimensions of learning, meaning 4 areas that respond to learning for what. So the first area being learning to know, so learning for lifelong learning. Second, learning to do for employability and transition into decent employment. Learning to be with regard to personal empowerment, and learning to live together with regard to participation and citizenship. And this life skills and citizenship framework has again specifically designed and contextualized for the region. It's really about putting the acquisition of life skills or those 21st century skills at the center of learning. And you can see here within the 4 dimensions, we have identified 12 most critical life skills in the region, from creativity, critical thinking and problem solving, over cooperation, negotiations and decision-making, self-management, resilience, communication, as well as respect for diversity, empathy, and participation. So together with partners, with experts, and with ministries of education across the region, we have identified those 12 life skills to be most essential here. And the LSCE framework now has led us then to the next question. How do we know what is the situation in my country? What is kind of life skills competency across my school age population, which led us to developing the LSCE measurement instrument that is designed for testing those life skills, referring to the famous LSCE wheel we've seen before. And we have developed instruments to measure 8 out of those 12 life skills, which you can see here. And the instruments for the remaining 4 life skills are currently under development, and we hope to have them also available as well as tested by the end of next year. And maybe also to highlight this measurement instrument is a joint effort of UNICEF and the World Bank, and working very closely with 3 champion countries, namely Egypt, State of Palestine, and Tunisia. And we also have Dr. Awad with us, who is from the Ministry of Education in Palestine, who will also later reflect about his experience and his expectations for applying the instrument. And also IEA has been mentioned several times, so they have been also together with NFVR be part of this process. So the instrument aims at measuring life skills at national level. It's not measuring life skills at classroom level or individual student level. So it provides an evaluation of the education system. It's about understanding the levels and distribution of life skills across the school age population, to inform the nature and scope of required intervention to foster life skills teaching and learning, and to track the progress of policies and interventions designed to enhance life skills. So the instrument provides a standardized approach for measuring life skills tailored to the MENA region, and standardized in that terms. We have developed and tested the instrument with those 3 countries, Egypt, State of Palestine, and Tunisia, also to reflect across those 3 countries the diverse context across the whole MENA region. So all the instruments have worked in those 3 countries, and therefore it can be used across all MENA countries. And the instrument is based on the most recent evidence, available tools, and also effective innovations. The purpose of the LSC instrument, it has been designed as a national large-scale assessment, and I think it was mentioned before, similar to TIMSS, PEARLS, etc., but yet again, not measuring academic learning, but rather life skills. Since not all students are responding to all life skills, it measures average level of life skills, not individual student level of life skills. And it's designed for grade 7 students, so which is around age group of 12 to 14. It measures the average level of life skills scores and the distribution across grade 7 students. And within that, it allows identifying inequalities and gaps in life skills across the school age population. As I mentioned, it can be applied in every country in the region, especially also because it is not based on any national curriculum, but purely focusing on measuring those life skills, regardless of disciplinary content. When applying the LSC measurement, and maybe also to highlight here, because that was a question earlier, we haven't applied the instrument yet. We have just finalized and launched the instrument in August, but we are preparing, especially with the 3 champion countries, Egypt, State of Palestine, Tunisia, to apply the instrument hopefully next year. As I mentioned, it's designed as national large-scale assessment, and the sample size is a minimum of 4,500 students, so approximately 150 schools, assuming 30 students per school. It's a 2-stage sampling design: first selection of schools, second then selection of classrooms and the students. The application time for each student is around 2 hours. To respond to 90 items, 60 of those measuring life skills, and then 30 items also on the background questionnaire when it's about receiving those background information characteristics of the students and of the teachers in schools. And the estimated costs are around 150 to 200,000 per country. Yet again, it depends on the specific design and sampling within the country. And finally, to share, and I will also share the links to those resources in the chat box. So what we have is we started off our work with first doing a comprehensive research about the state of the play and measuring life skills, what tools are available to measure life skills. And we have all that put into a publication called Measuring Life Skills. And that has then been used to inform the design of the instrument, which I mentioned we have just finalized for 8 out of the 12 life skills. And here we have some supportive documents, an advocacy brief giving a kind of a snapshot of the purpose of the instrument, then more detailed application guidelines, which really support the preparation of applying the instrument at country level, and then of course the instrument itself. And with that, many thanks to everybody, and back over to you, Dagmara.
Yes, thank you very much, dear Momo, for this introduction to the discussion about measuring life skills. I will in a minute give the floor to our colleague from Palestine, Dr. Mohamed Awad, who is involved in this process as you mentioned, in a champion state, in our case, the state of Palestine. Before that, I want to say that we have 2 more speakers, so Dr. Mohamed Awad and Dr. Maurice Bilager from UNRWA. So I will actually request your kind patience and to expand a little bit this timing for the webinar until maybe 2:15, so that we have also a chance to discuss and then to wrap up. So I think everybody is in agreement that we can expand our being together today until 2:15. And with this being said, so Dr. Awad, the floor is yours.
Good evening to you all. Let me speak in Arabic. First, التعبير عن الشكر لليونسكو واليونيسيف وكل الشركاء الموجودين، واعتقد ايضا عطفا على ما تفضلت به السيده ميمو في موضوع المهارات الحياتيه وتقويم التعليم، وخاصه في موضوع المكون الثاني من التعليم اضافه للمعارف والقيم والاتجاهات. اقول ان وزاره التربيه والتعليم في فلسطين اهتمت حقيقه بموضوع المهارات الحياتيه، وذلك بعد عوده السلطه الوطنيه الفلسطينيه وانطلاق اول منهاج وطني فلسطيني، وكان ذلك ضمن الخطوط العريضة الأساسية في مكونات المنهاج الفلسطيني. صحيح أنه لا يوجد منهاج مستقل لموضوع المهارات الحياتية، ولكن هذا يأتي من خلال السياقات التعليمية والمواقف والنشاطات الرياضية والصحية والإرشادية وكل ذلك، يعني تم تضمينه في موضوع المنهاج الفلسطيني لتكون المهارات الحياتية حاضرة وبقوة في هذا السياق. أيضا الوزارة حقيقة منذ أكثر من 15 عاما كان هناك أداة لقياس المهارات الحياتية، وكان يصدر في تقرير يسمى بتقرير المتابعة والتقييم كل عامين في فلسطين، وكان التركيز على عدد من المهارات الحياتية، وإن كان تتقاطع بعضها مع المهارات الحياتية التي تم الاتفاق أو الانطلاق وذكرتها 12 مهارة حياتية، بعضها كان متقاطع بحوالي 5 مهارات حياتية من خلال أداة يعني كانت أداة وطنية، ولكن فلسطين أتيح لها الفرصة بأن تكون حاضرة ومشاركة في بناء المهارات الحياتية التي تمت في عمان في أكثر من لقاء، وأيضا بمشاركة دول شمال أفريقيا والشرق الأوسط. أعتقد أن هذا الأمر كان لنا بمثابة فرصة حقيقية، وقد تم تطبيق الأداء في فلسطين، وهناك أيضا بعض طبعا النتائج ارتبطت ببناء هذه الأداة. أعتقد أنه قياس المهارات الحياتية في فلسطين هو يعني خطوة مهمة، وهي تحظى بدعم وتوجيه قيادة الوزارة وعلى رأسها وزير التربية والتعليم السيد الدكتور مروان العورتاني. وقد راسلنا اليونيسيف لاحقا بضرورة المساهمة والدعم والشراكة نظرا لما تعلمون من عوائق يفرضها الاحتلال والظروف المالية الصعبة في خاصة بعد الجائحة. لم نتوقف عن موضوع التعليم، كان هناك التعليم المدمج، وأيضا المهارات الحياتية أيضا كانت حاضرة. هذا الأمر يلقى باهتمام كل قطاعات الوزارة الإدارات المختلفة، وأيضا المجتمع المحلي، باعتبار أن التعليم مسؤولية مجتمعية. يعني هذا لدينا ما نقوله في هذا الموضوع، وإن كان التركيز بقوة على موضوع قياس كل مكونات التعليم، وأيضا هذا يخدم صانع القرار، وأيضا يعزز الإنسان الفلسطيني وأي إنسان بالمناسبة من امتلاكه للمعارف التي يسهل قياسها عادة بامتحان القلم والورقة والمهارات والاتجاهات، وإن كان هناك صعوبة بالغة في قياس هذه المهارات. أعتقد أن الأمر في سياقه الصحيح. شكرا.
Shukran, Dr. Awad, for this brief but very substantive intervention with regard to the importance of measuring life skills and the relevance of this process for the students in the state of Palestine. We now invite our last speaker, last but not least, the head of education of UNRWA, Mr. Moritz Bilager, who will talk about also the large-scale assessment challenges for UNRWA students, and his reflections will actually conclude this part before opening the open session and discussing some of your questions and comments that you shared during this almost 2 hours. And thanks again for your patience. So, dear Moritz, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, dear Dagmara, for this introduction. I am now intending to share my screen. I hope this will work as it did in our brief rehearsal.
We can see.
Perfect. Excellent. Good. Yes. Thank you very much. Let me first of all say that I was very glad to see in the concept note the mention to the Laboratorio in Latin America, which is of course one of the main initiatives of UNESCO in terms of assessment of learning, as well as the NAC map in Asia and the Pacific. We will study the assessment framework in greater detail. What would be especially interesting for us if we could indeed come to some kind of assessment framework that will allow for international assessments in the Arab states region, where we can have some comparability, but of course also the application of background questionnaires to understand the extent to which or under which circumstances learning occurs and how we can contribute to the improvement of education. Before going into the substance of the slides, allow me to say a brief word of thanks to a colleague who is joining us, Fuad Jadallah. He is our head of research and is responsible within UNRWA for learning assessment and other studies. So not all of you might be familiar with the agency. UNRWA is the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestine refugees in the Near East. And within this year, 2021, we have more than 5.6 million Palestinian refugees registered who live outside of their country, which is Palestine. In some cases, they live within Palestine, but the West Bank or Gaza, but they are not originally from there. We operate in 5 fields, which are Lebanon, Jordan, Syria, West Bank, and Gaza, serving over 500,000 students in school education and around 8,000 in technical and vocational education and training, as well as 2,000 in teacher training. Now, what I'd like to clarify first of all is that, yes, of course, in our pursuit of SDG 4 quality education for all, we believe in the importance of assessing the quality of education. However, for UNRWA, quality of education is more than just the achievement of learning, and we consider this to encompass 4 main dimensions. First of all, we intend our education to be relevant to the socioeconomic development needs of the communities within which our refugee students live. We understand this education has to be effective in terms of being able to instill learning in students. We believe it must be efficient in that we avoid corruption and wastage. But what we also believe is absolutely crucial is well-being and inclusion. If a student learns, but at the cost of her or his health, then we do not consider that quality of education. However, of course, in line also with the relevant SDG 4 indicators, for UNRWA education, learning is a sine qua non. It is a necessary condition for quality, and therefore we are assessing learning agency-wide since the year 2009. Yes, we call these studies monitoring learning achievement studies, where in grade 4 and 8 we assess achievement in mathematics and Arabic, and these studies have been implemented after 2009 in 2013, 2016, and we had one planned for 2020, but this was postponed due to the pandemic. And as you can imagine, we've got anchor items in each of the assessment, which allow for trend data. Now, speaking about this data, let me just very briefly mention some findings from the 2016 monitoring learning assessment study. What we noticed was relatively encouraging. Over half of students were performing at what we call the achieved level, which is, let's say, a satisfactory level in grades 4 and 8 Arabic, in grade 4 mathematics. That means that at grade 8 mathematics, less than half were performing at the achieved level. So this is not bad, but it is also not very good, of course. Where we did notice particularly strong achievement was in Syria and in Gaza. Now, this was 2016. This was well into the conflict in Syria. So you can imagine what the Syria field of UNRWA could have achieved if only the conflict had not been there. And I think as another testimony to the quality of education that UNRWA provides within the framework of the Syrian Arab Republic is that the highest scorer of the national exams in Syria of last year was a Palestine refugee student, Isra al-Rafa'i. So this is, of course, really quite remarkable because the Palestine refugees are a minority in Syria. What we also see consistently is a gender gap in favor of girls. We even see that in mathematics, and that is not necessarily in line with international trends, where we, of course, see boys achieving somewhat better in mathematics and sometimes science, and girls in languages. Although I would like to remind the audience that these kind of trends can also change over time. When we look, for example, at the ICCS, the international study on citizenship education, which, if I'm not mistaken, was conducted by the IEAE. In around 1990, we saw that boys were performing much better on citizenship education. In the 1999 assessment, boys and girls were more or less even, and then in the 2010 iteration of X, girls were decidedly better, and that trend has continued after that. Now we see that the gender gap in favor of girls is narrowing since 2013. Now, what we're doing this year is slightly different, and we have given the study a new name. We now call it ALOSAF, which stands for Assessment of Learning Outcomes, Study of Associated Factors. This is different from the MLA in a number of ways. The MLA was essentially census-based, and we believe that for the purpose of the study, which is not to track the performance of every single learner or the performance of every single school, there are other instruments for doing that. The purpose of the study is to understand where we stand as an education system and in the 5 fields. So therefore, a sample is more fit for purpose. For the first time, we're also implementing a study on factors associated with learning, which my colleague Momo, or our colleague Momo, called this background questionnaires. So this we didn't do before. We had a sampling design where, yes, we had some perception-related questions, but in the sampling design, the perceptions that were measured of some students were not connected with the achievement of those same students in the cognitive tests. And so now we have a sampling design where we implement questionnaires to the students participating in a cognitive test, their parents, their teachers, and their school principals, so that we can understand to a greater extent under which circumstances learning occurs. And in designing this study of associated factors, we are basing ourselves on a generic SIP model. We're all familiar with Stufflebeam's work in this regard, where we look at context factors, input factors, and process factors, as well as their interaction, to look at what we call the product, which is, of course, the learning achievement. And what is also different is that we implemented the MLA studies in grades 4 and 8. Now we are implementing this study in grades 5 and 9. Why do we do that? Because we're at the beginning of grades 5 and 9, and simply in terms of timing, it has not been possible to implement the test last year. So we have the assumption that learning at the beginning of these grades is similar or equal to that at the end of grades 4 and 8. Just 2 last slides, because I do understand that we're somehow pressed for time. In terms of instrument and protocol development, we, of course, have a few idiosyncrasies that we have to consider. One of them is that we, as an agency, teach the host country curriculum within the state of Palestine. We follow the Palestine National Authority curriculum, in Syria, the Syrian curriculum, etc. So, of course, we need to have some kind of curriculum analysis where we looked at, the subjects, the domains of learning, the subdomains, in mathematics, algebra, arithmetics, geometry, data and probability, etc. And then, of course, we looked at performance expectations and created some kind of dummy tables to map the curricula and then to translate them to items in a cognitive test. We do not, by the way, use a rotational design, because the number of items that we have in the cognitive test can be addressed within one test. Of course, we had to consider our limited financial means. As an agency, you may be aware that we're going through serious financial troubles as an agency. And of course, we need to be careful in developing strategies for addressing learning loss on the basis of the data that we hope to obtain to the SAF part, through the SAF part of this study. Then finally, looking forward, just sorry for this. So looking forward, we would like to further refine the SAF framework. We would like to see how we can use technology in the administration of the tests. Very interesting to hear, Momo During's presentation, because we would like to see whether we can look at testing of non-cognitive domains of learning. I agree, Dagmar, it's not a formulation that gains a beauty prize, but yes, through assessing something, I think we give a signal that this is important. And I think we can agree that Bloom had these 3 domains of learning, the cognitive, the affective, and the psychomotor. Why are we just assessing the cognitive? And I agree, when we talk about psychomotor, that is eye-hand coordination, of course, that there is a cognitive component in that. Affective and the cognitive are also related, but still we believe it will be interesting at least to conduct further experiments in assessing arts education and physical education. I remember that that is very tricky in Chile. Around 10 years ago, they assessed physical education, through things like body mass index, where we cannot say that this is necessarily a result of physical education courses. They assessed it through how far somebody can jump, which already I think comes closer to a result of learning. But still, of course, we see that widely, the cognitive domain of Bloom's taxonomy is considered the most developed. We know that the work on the psychomotor domain was never completed, and I think that is something that we see reflected, of course, in our assessments. And of course, what is absolutely key to us is a focus on educational equality. We do not want anybody to be left behind. So sorry, because I believe that my slides were not displayed properly. I do apologize for that. Thank you for this opportunity, and I give the floor back to you, Dagmar. Thank you very much.
Many thanks, dear Moritz, and thank you also for talking about these equity issues in assessment, so not just quality relevance of assessment, but also the equity aspects that other speakers have also discussed, including the issues of ethics. So we, I think, gathered today a wide range of insights with regard to assessment that help us refine further the draft learning assessment framework, and allow me now to also address some of the questions, comments, and issues that our participants raised. Sorry again, we cannot give you the floor now because of time limitations, but as I said, we try to respond now, and also with the report to all these issues that you brought about during these 2 hours. I will summarize some of the issues to which maybe we answered already, and then I will address 2 questions to our panelists to see maybe to have some quick feedback from their side. So several participants, they asked about formative assessment, examples and tools and guidance for formative assessment. And our headquarter colleagues, they mentioned a lot of these different resources and sources for formative assessment in the chat function. But if you go through the framework, to the draft framework that we shared now also several times in the chat function, you will find more ideas about formative assessment, and I think this could be a topic for the next webinar to actually conduct a webinar that is more practical oriented. I think this was more like a awareness raising webinar on the assessment issues and on the learning assessment framework for the Arab region. But for the next webinar, for sure, we will try to be more looking into practicalities and guidance from a pragmatic and practical perspective. Then another question was about this Arab network of learning assessment. And we said there is no such network yet, but with this webinar, we would like to launch the discussion and to set the grounds for the development of such a network. We'll devote a website to this issue of learning assessment, and we are looking also for a catchy name for our network in the Arab region. So please feel free to think about the possible name that is ringing a bell in Arabic with regard to quality learning assessment that is also equitable and relevant for the learners in our region. Then maybe a question for our panelists, maybe we can address this immediately, is about examples of using ICTs in assessment, in learning assessment, and how to assess learners during remote and online learning. So if some of our panelists would like to address this issue and give one or two examples very quickly. Some examples are also in the framework. So I mentioned in the chat that if you go through the text of the learning assessment framework, you will find some hints, some examples with regard to the usage of ACTs and their added values. So who would like maybe to respond to this question from our panelists?
Dakmara, I would like to put in a word, based on my experience with during remote learning, we really had to do less with actual tests, and we relied more on formative assessment, classroom, online discussions, open-ended kind of questions, where they even open book, open notes, because we really wanted them to synthesize material and to try and put it together and to come up. So we use less testing, less objective items, and more open-ended kind of assessment, more formative assessment, more oral presentations, more performance assessments that can be, observed, demonstrated while online learning, at the same time evaluating them and sharing with them the criteria for good performance and so on. So that was more useful for us to identify the progress students are making, and so we made use more or less of formative assessment for summative purposes. That was in remote learning. We felt this is more it's fair, it is more accurate, and much more reliable. Thank you.
Thank you, Karma. Is there another of our distinguished panelists who would like to answer? Mrs. Shireen?
Yes, thank you so much, دكمارة. كما ذكرت الدكتورة بالنسبة للسؤال، كما ذكرت الدكتورة كارما، الحقيقة أن التقييم المعتمد على الأداء والابتعاد عن استراتيجية القلم والورقة بمعنى الاختبار الاعتيادي اللي احنا بنعرفه هو الحل الأمثل لحالات تقييم التعلم أونلاين. الآن طبعاً هذا بيعتمد على المساق، يعني على سبيل المثال نضرب أمثلة عملية مشان إذا كان معنا بعض الزملاء من المعلمين والمعلمات. لو كنت أنت بتدرس اللغة العربية أو بتدرس اللغة الإنجليزية، اللغات، أنت ممكن تطلب من الطالب إنه هو يسجل لنفسه مقطع على سبيل المثال فيديو ويرسل لك إياه. بتكون أنت محدد المهمة اللي مطلوبة منه، خصوصاً مثلاً إذا كنت بتعلم اللغة الإنجليزية، تطلب منه يصور لنفسه مقطع صوري، صوت وصورة أو تسجيل صوتي، ويرسل لك إياه أنت وأنت تكون تقيمه. ولكن كتير مهم إنه يكون في تفاهم مسبق بينك وبين طلابك على المعايير اللي انت رح تقيمهم بناء عليها. وممكن هنا كمان نستخدم تقييم الأقران اللي هو البير أسسمنت، إنه مثلا شيرين بتقيم لإكس وإكس مثلا بقيم لواي وإلى آخره. فأنت بتخلق بالغرفة الصفية وبالموقف التعليمي زخم بين طلابك لحتى ما هم يتبادلوا عملية التقييم. لو كنت مثلا بتقيم بمساقات تانية ممكن نفس الشيء، ترسل لهم مثلا تطلب منهم مهمة معينة، بروجكت صغير، مشروع صغير يعملوا لك إياه، يعملوه من أدوات بالبيت موجودة ويصوروا لك إياه ويرسلوا لك إياه وتعمل عملية تقييم. الموضوع مش معقد ولكنه مش بسيط ومسخف. يعني اللي بنحكي فيه مش معناه انه التقييم انا بس يبعث لي تسجيل واحط له علامات للطالب او للطلاب، لا، بدي اوضح لهم في اطر. اقرأوا الاطار اللي ارسلوا لكم اليونسكو، رح تلاقوا كثير من الخطوات الارشاديه والتعريفيه كيف انه تطبق التقييم المعتمد على الاداء كتقييم تكويني يساعدك على إصلاح الخلل في تعلم طلابك ووضعهم على الطريق الصحيح.
شكرا Mrs. Shireen. And I'm switching now to another interesting question. This question came up in different forms, but it's about actually what's the link between the learning assessment, the assessment of learning, and the assessment of a country's educational policies and practices. So because when we evaluate, we can evaluate different dimensions in education systems. And so the question is, if we do such assessments of learning, what does this mean, or what's the connection with other types of institutional or national system evaluation? So who would like to answer? Yeah,
maybe
I'll give the floor to Momo first and then to you, Ms. Shireen.
No, okay, sorry, then really just quickly from my side. Maybe to reflect on what I presented before, that we first started developing the life skills and citizenship framework, and that has been already used and informed education system across almost all countries in the region, even being the foundation for major education sector reforms. So the LSC measurement instrument was a second step, so that we can see where do we stand when we talk about life skills, to then inform further integrating life skills into the teaching and learning process. So that has already been this overall connection between the vision behind it and the measurement instrument as a tool to diagnose the education system and the life skills across young people. So it's important to always have this connection. But yet again, on the different learning assessment instrument we discussed today and we reflected on, we have those really looking at national large-scale assessment and evaluation of the education system, so to then really by purpose inform education policies and reforms. And you have those really happening at the classrooms, the students, the teachers, to inform the direct teaching and learning process in the classroom. So different kind of instruments for different kind of purposes. And that's it from my side. Thanks.
Thank you, dear Momo. And now Mrs. Shireen and then Karma.
يعني باختصار التقييم assessment for learning هو التقييم من أجل التعلم، فهو ينحى لأن يكون تقييما تكوينيا، بمعنى اللي هو احنا بنسميه امتحان منتصف الفصل أو الميد تيرم، أو ممكن تقييم عادي معتمد على الأداء. الغرض منه إنه أنا بجمع معلومات قدر الإمكان تخبرني وتعطيني صورة ما التعلم الذي حصل عليه الطالب، وهاي المعلومات بقدمها الأصل للطالب لأنه شريك معي بعملية التعلم، بقدم له إياها ولأسرته بطريقة تساعده على أنه يصلح تعليمه، تمام، ويتخذ ربما إجراءات إثرائية أو علاجية. الآن التقييم of assessment اللي هو تقييم التعلم هو ينحى لأن يكون تقييم ختامي أو summative assessment، والغرض منه أنه بنهاية الفصل الدراسي أو بنهاية المساق الجامعي أو بنهاية العام الدراسي أنا حقيقة بدي أكون صورة عن مستوى هذا الطالب حتى أعمل له تسكين مثلا في مستوى أداء معين. التقييم الأول أدواته تكاد تكون أكثر performance based assessment اللي تكلمت عنه الدكتورة وتكلمت عنه أنا، والتقييم الختامي يميل أكثر إلى أن يكون اختباراً يعني structured منظم ويجمع معلومات عن الطلاب.
Yes, thank you, Mrs. Shireen and Karma. Very quickly.
Very briefly, yes. You know, the evidence we get from a learning assessment framework or the learning assessments that are being done at the national level provides very valuable and reliable and valid information to see the extent of the achievement of the outcomes of an education system. And accordingly, we can identify if there are issues, where are the issues? Is it in the curriculum? Is it in the teacher training? Is it in the textbooks? You know, we can really, they provide us with very useful information to evaluate our policies and our procedures. And especially when alignment is there. Alignment, you know, between all of these components of the system, both vertical and horizontal.
Shukran, and maybe a last issue that I will raise now during this open session.
Mara, I think Moritz has his hand up.
Yeah, sorry, I cannot see. Yes, now I see Dr. Moritz and Dr. Al-Khattaye. Sorry, Moritz.
Thank you so much, Madam Dr. Karma and Dagmara. Yeah, no, just I'd like to very briefly address this last question also because it is, I think it's a very important thing because, you know, of course, sometimes assessment of learning is somehow demonized, and there's this idea that assessment for learning is better. But I'm again going to agree with Madame Momo. I completely agree with what she said. There's courses for courses. We know, of course, that there's a difference between examinations and assessments, which have got two completely different functions. But I also believe that you know, assessment for learning, to my mind, it's not. I know this doesn't sound so good, but for me, it's not really assessment. It is actually just teaching learning. Because even when you're in the classroom and a teacher checks with her students whether they got something, she is assessing something, but this is what a good teacher should do. So really, to my mind, assessments of learning, like the ones that we're talking about, serve these two main functions. Yes, we need to understand the temperature of learning. We need to understand whether a system achieves what it wanted to achieve, which means that the unit of analysis is the system and actually not individual schools and individual students. And if we mix the unit of analysis up, that can lead to serious issues, because if a school thinks that they're the unit of analysis, then they might think that they would need to cheat. They might think that they might need to prepare their students, and that will contaminate the results. And of course, the second objective is to understand under which circumstances learning occurs, so that we can recreate those circumstances through specific and targeted policies. I just wanted to emphasize that. Thank you very much, Karma, Dagmara, Momo colleagues. Thank you.
Shukran, Moritz, for this kind of comments that are right to the point. And Dr. Al-Khattaye.
شكرا. أعتقد إنه يعني هناك فرق كبير جدا بين learning of teaching of assessing of learning and for learning. في العادة assessment for learning تكون diagnostic in nature، بمعنى انه يعني احيانا نختبر مجموعه في، يعني خلينا نقول مثلا في الصف الثالث ابتدائي، نحن اول ما يصل الينا الطالب المعلم يقدم لهم اختبار للمهارات التي ينبغي انها تكون مكتسبة عندهم، بحيث انه يبدأ معهم منها حتى ينطلق. هذه الاختبارات التي تقدم قبل أن يقدم لهم أي خبرة تعليمية هي ما يسمى بالاختبارات أو التقويم for learning. بينما التقييم of learning هي التقييمات الختامية اللي العادة تكون بعد ما نعالج الوضع، نحدد نقاط الضعف، بعدها إنه إحنا نتجه إلى يعني ونعلم الأطفال، وفي النهاية نرى إذا أردنا أن نعرف ما هي كم اكتسب، بحيث أنه يكون فيه بروموشن للأشخاص من جريد إلى جريد أو من مادة إلى أخرى، نقدم لهم التقييم of learning. شكرا.
Yes, sorry. Shukran, Dr. Al-Kataye, and many thanks for this clarification, again, with regard to the possible multiple purposes of assessments and how the different types of assessments and their purposes can work together to actually contribute to relevant and to useful assessment. Because of the time constraints, I'm not going to address another question to the panelists, but I want just to mention some of the issues that have been raised by our participants, including, for instance, how to engage students in their assessment of learning and including in higher education. Our network, our work is more looking into K-12 levels, but this would not maybe prevent us looking also into higher education as a continuum of learning assessment across all levels. So thank you for this suggestion to also include higher education. And I think for this question about how to engage students, we gave already some answers, but during the next webinar, this will be a question to delve into, to be more practical and to give more examples. Then another important question was how to assess learners from different backgrounds. Can a learning assessment be customized to the background of learners? And I think we partly responded also to this question. Momo and Moritz, for instance, they talked about factors that are associated to learning and how to take them into account when we do learning assessment. But there are many other issues to be discussed. And finally, the issue of being clear about what do we assess, what knowledge and what skills do we want to assess, and how to make learners and parents and other stakeholders aware about what learning assessment is actually assessing, is targeting. So with this being said, I would like to thank very much to all of our speakers, to our distinguished guests, and to our participants, to our two wonderful interpreters, Rana and Elsa, who helped us engaging with the smooth communication and keeping up with the very rich exchange of ideas. To our colleague Ellie, who's helping us from the technical side, and Mahmoud and Walid and Noor, who helped me grasp the questions and comments from your very rich exchange. And as said, we'll put the recording on YouTube, so you will have also a chance to see the recording of this webinar, and we'll share a report also announcing the next steps. So we keep in touch, and giving this very important interest, this outstanding, I would say, interest on learning assessment, we will definitely continue on this avenue without neglecting that learning assessment has to be tackled in conjunction with curriculum, with teaching practices, and all the other important components of education systems. I just remembered when I was a young researcher and a teacher in the early 90s, and we started our reforms in post-communist Romania and in other Eastern European countries. One question that we heard very often was, which is the component that should lead education reform? Should it be assessment? Should it be curriculum? Should it be teachers? And in some countries, indeed, it was assessment, the reform of learning assessment that was driving reforms. But as we became older, we learned that actually it's not the right question. It should not be assessment driving or curriculum driving. They should work together, and they should provide the grounds for harmonized approach in all education systems. And we hope that through our network and to our partnership with other networks and with what people are doing at national systems, we will get closer to that idea of learning as of assessment as learning. So learning's contribution to quality of life, and the role, of course, of assessment in making this possible. So thanking you very, very much. Stay well, and we'll stay in touch. Shukran.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you. Bye-bye.
So,
see you soon. See you soon. Huh?
Do we stay, the panelists, do we stay for a short debriefing? 10 minutes maybe? Do you still have time now?
Sure. Fine.
Yes, so let's wait. I don't know if there a way to bring us back, only the panelists, or do we have to wait until the participants will leave?
No, you cannot. Maybe you should. It's better to send a Zoom link, Teams link.
Another one?
No, we wait a little bit, maybe until they will leave, and then we just exchange a little bit.
You have to wait for 200.
And for the recording, somebody can stop the recording.
Yeah.